up on your parties. Dropping the hit, got me Haraami. Coming to see like a tsunami. I know you calling me Haraami.
Yes, everyone, welcome to another episode of Haraami United. We've got I'm not going to call him a special guest no more because he's one of us now. We've got Sadi on with us as well, all the way across the pond. Sadi, how you doing?
Doing well. Thank you again for having me.
No, obviously you're part of the show, man. Afsa, you keeping well?
I'm just recovering from driving up and down the country, bro. And the thing
He's been
is,
rubbing-
Sadi's going to be like, what drive? You did 4 hours? It's nothing.
It's nothing. It's Dallas to Houston.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Afsa and Laki been rubbing shoulders with the Manchester United elite, even if it is from that yesteryear. But anyway, we digress. I mean, Sadi, the one thing I love about having you on the show or listening to your perspective, not only are you, how can I put it, intellectually intelligent, because you have to be to do the job that you do, and I think most people will know who you are. But I can just see in your background, you got Miami, you got the American football, as you want to call it. You obviously got Cantona. You do follow other sports as well. So what I feel is you can always give it a broader perspective. Us guys here, let's be real, we're football junkies, just football. Cricket, if our team wins, if India wins, I'm always a cricket fan. If they don't, then I don't really watch cricket. But yeah, so you always bring that perspective. So I think it's important for the audience to at least know from the perspective you come from. But yeah, I think this show, again, just trying to keep it objective, in the middle, forget what allegiances we have to either the club, who, whether we Ineos in, Ineos out, Glazers in, Glazers out, Player FC, whether we like Jadon Sancho, whether we like Anthony, whether it's Bruno Fernandes. Forget all that. What we want to do today, we want to answer the question. And Sadi, I think you've been coming up with a lot of the stats of late as well. So it'll be good to share that. Has this summer been good enough, or have we put in the right things in place for us to turn from 15th, which really should have been an outlier season, to where we should be top 4 Champions Leagues? I mean, in your perspective, do you think we've done enough? Answer that first.
I think you can't look at it in a vacuum. You have to look at the clubs that are in the top 4. So Liverpool, Arsenal, City, Chelsea. And the fact that, for example, Chelsea had the benefit of Club World Cup money. Liverpool, Arsenal, City have now been in this new Champions League format for a couple of years. They were certainly in the old Champions League format for a few more years. And are we trying to compete with them right now, or are we trying to build up to compete with them in the next 2 to 3 years? And I would argue that based on our transfer spending, which is probably net, 60 million-ish, you're trying to compete with the middle tiers, the Forests, the Newcastles, the Villas, the Brightons, to try and get up into that. And you're not trying to break that top 4 hegemony yet, because clearly you look at their spending and you look at our spending, it's 2 different levels of spending. Yes, at the beginning of the window, we certainly looked like we were top heavy in our spending, but that all sort of balanced out when they got rid of the bomb squad. So the answer to your question is, we've made good acquisitions, both. If you told me the day after Bilbao, when we lost to Spurs, that you would have ended the summer with Sesko and Mbuemo, Cunha, and a goalkeeper, we would have all signed up for that, right? It's just that the net doesn't look as great, because you were also able to sell Garnacho for 40. You were able to sell Anthony for mid-20s. You were able to basically sell Højlund for 43, because now Napoli will almost certainly make the Champions League. You're hoping you've sold Rashford for 40 to Barcelona. Add all that up, that's about 150 coming into you, and you've spent about 215. That gives you that net. This doesn't include, obviously, wages saved, so on and so forth. But Liverpool, Arsenal, and City and Chelsea are in a different stratosphere of spending. They just have more money. And so I would say we've taken a step up. The acquisitions we've had are truly, they're top end talent. Cunha and Mbuemo are as good as you can get in the Premier League.
So would we say then, and obviously I've saw for you as well, has this summer business improved our first 11? as it stands today, with Mbuemo, Šeško, and Cunha. Bear in mind, we then lost Rashford. Kind of didn't really play much last year, but then Anthony, Garnacho as well. And I'm
You've
going to include
improved.
that because they're playing a different role. I don't know whether that's fair enough to say. But yeah, is the existing 11, whatever, is it stronger than what it was last season?
You've improved the floor of the club because you've also improved the fitness levels. Clearly, these are bigger, stronger, faster players as well compared to what you've let go. But at the end of the day, performances on the field will tell you whether you've done that or not. But on paper, yes.
Yeah, I think for me as well, on paper, you and Aki mentioned this when we were in the car ride and everything was going crazy with Emmy and we decided to record. And Mbuemo and Cunha, if you look at the stats last year, they were in that top echelon. Take out Haaland, Salah, and the outliers. They were the best of the rest. So on paper, you've improved it. You've got a guy in Šeško who is known for scoring. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen him score a normal goal. Just seems to be absolute bangers. So you've improved the output on paper, but we're yet to see that on the pitch, which
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, obviously, it's 3 league games, 1 loss, 1 draw, and 1 win just about. And obviously, we lost to Grimsby in the Carabao Cup where we got knocked out. Okay, so how about then? Have we actually strengthened in the positions we needed to?
See, that's a key question. The question is, if you look at 60 million net spend, did we make the best use of 60 million net spend, right? And the only argument you could make, not the only, but one of the arguments you can make is that you don't buy 2 10s and you take that money and you buy a central midfielder. If that is the amount that you're going to spend net, it's a different conversation to say we should have spent more. But if the decision is that this is how much you have to spend, 60 million net, then how are you divvying up those resources? And I think they divvied them up as reasonably as you could do. Could you have had another year of Højlund and Xerxes? Potentially, but I just think that the way last season went for Højlund, I think just emotionally, mentally, I think you needed a change. Now, did that change need to be an 80 million pound striker coming from somewhere else? Maybe, maybe not. Could you have done an Ollie Watkins, someone cheaper, and use that extra money? Potentially. But if you look at acquisition of players who've scored goals in the Premier League, you can't get Salah, you can't get Haaland, you can't get Isaac, you can't get Cole Palmer. Not much else.
Couldn't get Isaac.
Yeah, but he would have been priced out, and he wasn't going anywhere else apart from Liverpool, and so you got the 2 best players. Will Šeško come good? It's always tricky bringing players who've not played in the Premier League. Time will tell, but these were decent shouts, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about net spend. Now, I'm not confident that they actually knew what their net spend was going to be, because the prices that they've got in the end, they were obviously hoping for more than what they've got.
Don't forget, we were also looking at totally different targets at the beginning of the window compared to what we came out with.
We were not getting Delap through a spanner in the works, because if you'd gotten Delap in, you would have saved 50 million on his price compared to Šeško, for example. That's your midfielder right there.
And bearing in mind, there was reports at that time whereby I think it was Laurie Whitwell said that we were looking at a Delap and a midfielder. So they knew right at the outset that they needed a midfielder. But for whatever reason, they went straight to Mbuemo and spent 6 to 7 weeks there. But yeah, so the argument also comes in then, because again, we've not had a great start. Let's be honest, people are saying a clean slate, he's learned from his players last season. He needed a pre-season. We've had all that. Now, we shouldn't be 10th. I think that's where we are. Bearing in mind, the last game, we just about scraped through. The guy obviously fouled Ahmad, and got a penalty. If it wasn't for that, if we would spend another 10 minutes, we still wouldn't have scored. So the question becomes have we then spent enough in the right places whereby we're now shoehorning in Bruno to play in a position that is not his position? Could we have disposed of Bruno? We're getting that 80 to 100 million from Saudis, took it out of his decision to make that decision, or should we not just bought Mbuemo in? And use that money.
You ask an interesting question, but again, it can't be put in a vacuum because of the system and the formation that we play. So in general, in companies, sports, corporations, you want to raise the ceiling that you have by putting people in their best positions based on the talent and the skill set that they naturally have. We don't do that in our current system, right? Take, for example, Bruno's position. And so you're already sort of starting off handicapped in that sense. The decision to not sell Bruno was an interesting decision because if you go back to the statements made, it was very much a Amorim and therefore a Wilcox decision that we want to keep him. And Bruno himself said, I will leave if the club need me to leave for financial reasons, but they have told me I don't need that to happen. And so once the club said, well, it's up to you, they've already given up that authority. And so he wasn't going to go at this point. He's still sort of in the prime of his career. Yes, that prime may be tailing off. He's now into his 30s, but he's still in the prime. He doesn't want to spend his years in Saudi. He has a young family. They're well settled in England. I don't blame him. And so where you spend the money, the positions that you do, you need 2 10s because your formation has 2 10s. If your formation was a 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 and you only need the 110, you probably don't buy 2 10s. And then you rejig your entire philosophy in the window. So all of it stems from the formation that is being played.
I have one question on that. And also, well, to both of you really, this whole thing of we need 2 10s. Could we have avoided getting Mbuemo potentially? Because I see Cunha as more of a 10 than Mbuemo was. Like you said, Harps, Bruno Fernandes has been shoehorned out of position. But what was stopping us putting Bruno back in the 10 with Cunha alongside him? Don't forget, we've also got Mason Mount, who started the season really well. Unfortunately, he's picked up an injury, but 3 guys for 2 positions is...
Plus Ahmad, plus Xerxes, who can also play that position.
Yeah,
plus Menu can play the 10 as well. You have a lot of 10s. The thing is, Mbuemo also provides that winger that you've lost. You don't have any wingers anymore. Say this manager leaves and the next manager happens to be a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. You've lost Rashford, you've lost Garnacho. Who are your wingers? Yes, you have Ahmad who can play on the right, but on the left, you're sort of bereft. And so Mbuemo covers those 2 spots in one individual.
Do you think the recruitment, and this is what I've said for a while, I don't think the recruitment is based off this 3-4-3 formation. It looks to me as though it's sort of more long-term, more, yes, we've got the place to play a 3-4-3, but we can jig it around, and we've also got the place to play in a 4-3-3, a 4-5-1. I mean, we can really switch it up, and we've got enough place to play a 4-4-2. I don't know where that leads us, but I don't know. Look, at the start of the window, like you said, Sadie, if you would have told us we get Mbuemo, Cunha, and a new goalkeeper, we'd all have been buzzing. The last 48 hours, I was like, Emi Martinez is coming. Oh my God, I can't believe, to me, he's one of the best goalkeepers in the world. And then we end up with Lammens? Is it Lammens? Lamont? I don't know.
Lammens, it starts with an A. LA, should I say.
And David De Gea was a young goalkeeper. He was an outlier. He had a lot of trust put in him by Sir Alex Ferguson. He had Rio and Vida in front of him he had Evra as well. Neville, Rafa, he had giants of the game in front of him to lead him through games. Who's going to lead this guy through a game?
No, the goalkeeper is an interesting one because if you look at the history of Manchester United, it's a tough position for a goalkeeper. You look at goal all the way back to Jim Leighton in that FA Cup semifinal year before the replay where Ferguson dropped him, and then you look at after Schmeichel came in, you had Barthez, Tim Howard, Massimo Taibi, you had Mark Bosnich, Van der Sar came in, you got Lucky, but De Gea really struggled in his first season until that save from Mata, that free kick against Chelsea that sort of gave him confidence. It's a tough job to be Manchester United keeper. You can have all the skill set in the world, but heavy is the head that wears that crown that is the keeper. To your first point, that is the hope of a football structure, right? That they buy players who are manager independent. And certainly, if you look at the squad right now, you have a very good squad to play a 4-3-3. You have Euro and De Ligt as your center backs. You have Dorgu and Dallo as your fullbacks. Three of Menu, Ugarte, and Bruno would be very good, and then front three of Sesko and Mbuemo and Cunha. That works, and you have depth there. You have Mason Mount who can play off the right. You have Ahmad who can play in the wing. So certainly, this is a easy transition to make if the next manager is a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. So you give Jason Wilcox and Ravel credit for doing that. They didn't just shoehorn players for Ruben, which is really what you want.
But you do. I agree with the concept of that, but that only works if you are going to recruit for that system. So the question becomes if we all know this system for Ruben is 3-4-3, and if they're now doing a bit of 3-4-3, but a bit of 4-3-3, whatever have you, has Ruben can anybody then truly say Ruben's been backed to the players that he wants? Because don't forget, he wanted a midfielder as well. Has he
It's
been
a good question.
backed?
And the way I would say it is the backing of a manager isn't just the players you bring in. It's the players he has chosen to get rid of. It's the players he has chosen to keep. He chose to keep a Luke Shaw, Mason Mount, and Bruno, for example. That's his choice. He has chosen to keep and start the season with Onana and Altay Bayender. And then he has chosen to get rid of Garnacho and Sancho and Rashford and Anthony and so on and so forth, for better or for worse. These are his decisions. So he has been backed. He's been backed financially. He's been backed to the tune of, if you include Dorgu, that's above $300 million. That's a lot of money that spent on players that he wants. The use of Sesko in the beginning makes me wonder if he really wanted Sesko. Did he want Gyökeres? Did he want someone else? But we'll see. The City game will be interesting if Cunha is injured and he can't play, and Mount does recover. Does he go false nine? Does he what does he do? It'll be telling to see who he starts against City.
Yeah, like you said, there's going to be arguments 2 and 4 whether people can say he's been backed properly or not. And that's what I didn't want this summer. But I think, like you said, there's been backing in terms of signing, but more than not, there's definitely been backing by the players that they want to get rid of. So this whole harmony that they want to create in the club, etc., etc. Well, what my next question would be?
Harps, let's not forget, he was backed by just him keeping his job. A lot of other clubs, you wouldn't keep your job if you're under a point per game after 27, 28 games. I tweeted this data out that I had a hard time finding managers with the loss rate above 50% after 29 games, and the reason for that is most managers don't get 29 games to lose more than half their games. That's why when I set the data at minimum number of games of 29, the number of managers is very few because most of them get fired before they've reached 29 games if you're losing more than half. And he had a loss rate of 52%.
Ten Hag got a pre-season.
Yeah,
the Ten Hag thing is interesting. I think that's purely political, because at 2 games or 3 games, it's not based on on-field performances, right? That's definitely an off-the-field issue.
And don't forget the soul,
or politics or whatnot. Correct. So you don't know if that's a falling out. But Ruben's been back just by the sheer fact he still has a job.
Yeah, and I was going to touch upon that, but like you said, I know you've done that day to whereby you just can't even find managers who've passed 29 games to see how bad they've done. I think Gary Neville was one of them, but I think no, actually he wasn't one of them. Which was
No,
Gary
because he
Neville
was fired. He was
27?
fired before 29 games,
28. I think he was.
and
yeah,
he
I
still
think
had
he
a
got-
better loss rate than Ruben win rate as well. Before he was fired.
And more often than not, he's the one that's used to mock about a manager's position. So I don't think Man United fans can't ever say again, "Oh, you can't take Gary Neville serious because he failed," because Ruben's doing exactly the same. But what I want to ask them boys is, what number you're going to give this summer transfer out of 10? Now, before you do that, I do kind of want to give context about that because if nobody else has signed anybody else, no other clubs have signed, that becomes an easy thing to say. But the kind of teams that we're looking at, that we're trying to rub shoulders with, the likes of Chelsea, City, Liverpool, Tottenham. I'm not going to include Newcastle, but I should do. But I think we kind of know what Newcastle's been through. But let me just typically start with those teams. Now, I'm not going to go through all the Chelsea's players that they brought in because there's
Be here all day, bro.
an episode by itself. But yeah, they got João Pedro, Gittin, Garnacho, Hato, Liam Delap, Estavio, okay, Saar, and that's the again I can keep going on. But then you've also got Arsenal, 8 signings: Gyökeres, Eze, Zubimendi, Arrizabalaga,
Madueke.
Nuno Madueke, and Mosquera. Hinakapi as well from we just been talking about Ten Hag, Leverkusen. Liverpool, they got Wirtz, Alexander Isak, they got 3-4 other signings as well. And Tottenham, Javi Simons, Moani is coming, and they've got about another 3-4 other signings that have also come in. So just to compare to them, those teams, how have we done? What rating would you give our window?
3. Liverpool went out and dropped close to $500 million. They got the best striker in the league. They got a great up-and-coming striker, whatever your thoughts are. They put a lot of money in Wirtz. They got brand new wing-backs. They got a couple of goalkeepers as well. Chelsea just did what Chelsea do and just hoovered up a bunch of talent. Arsenal, I think, have had one of the better windows, looking at where they've strengthened and how they've done it. I think you might have been onto something when you said it might actually be their year. But if you compare what everyone around us has done to what we've done, we are so far short of the mark. I mean, we were short before. I think we're even further behind now.
Yeah, so you're giving it a 4. So I didn't. What
3.
would you say? Sorry, 3. Sorry, 3.
Well, that was my point right at the beginning. You can't compare it to those clubs. Liverpool, their sales are, they've sold Nunez, they've sold what's his name, Diaz. Trent's gone. They sold Harvey Elliott this week. Their sales are tremendous, and they're in a different financial stratosphere as us. They spent 0 last summer. They weren't expecting to win the league last summer. That was a bonus when they did that. But they've now turbocharged this next iteration of this squad and sort of future-proof themselves against when Salah leaves and Van Dijk, especially if they've got that Gay deal over the line, which they didn't. But they're going to go back in for him, just like they did with Van Dijk. They tried to get him in the summer, couldn't get him, but then went back in for Van Dijk in January for Southampton, if you remember. The other clubs, they're just playing in a different pool than us. We're off in a. So when I give them a 6.5, but I would grade it against the other clubs, the Villas, the Spurs, the Newcastles, the Forests, and that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, the reality is we're not in the same league as the other clubs. The new Champions League model is so different now. There's so much money in there that you cannot compete. And our finances are a mess. That's a different show. But
so if you're saying a 6, comparing that to the mid-table, where I don't think even we're at the moment, but okay, that mid-table. So what you're saying then overall, really, it's about a 3. Because if you're not even comparing it to those top 5 other clubs, then that's an indictment by itself as well. Me myself, I'm going.
Well, I mean, look, Sesko, for example, is a great striker. Where Arsenal chose not to go for him, Liverpool chose not to go for him. Liverpool went for Isaac. Arsenal went for Gyökeres. Time will show if that tells. City didn't need a striker, so that was a moot point. Chelsea went for João Pedro. They certainly could have gone for Sesko. Cunha and Mbuemo, I think every one of those clubs would have potentially wanted. I think they're good enough. They're at least, if not for first team, for squad depth. Those are good players. Lammens, who knows? We're just guessing with any young keeper because it's such a unique club to play for in that position.
Yeah, Gary Neville always says it's the hardest role in the Premier League in English football is the United goalkeeper role.
I think it would have been higher if we'd gotten a midfielder, but again, it goes back to that point. Where do you, if you only have this much money, and you got less money because of the fact that you didn't sell players for as much as you wanted? It's been reported that Chelsea paid 40 for Garnacho. They came up for 25, but we also came down from 50, 55. So when you do when they're doing their internal budget, they certainly were expecting more money for Anthony from Betis, or probably expecting more money from Garnacho. Certainly, we're expecting more money or guaranteed money from Rashford. Probably similar for Højlund. So they've taken hits both ways, right?
Well, when you batter your assets like they have, deminimize it. You're not going to get the price that you want for it. But what I would say is, we should have done what Liverpool done under Coutinho when they had Coutinho, sold him, and then they bought the 2 best players, Alisson and Van Dijk, with that money. So we should have done that with Bruno this year.
Should have done that with Bruno.
And reinvested it. But boys, conscious of time, now that we know where we are, we've seen a couple of performances, we've seen the sales and buy-ins. Where are we finished in this season? After I'll start with you.
I think I said 10th in the predictions. Around the same, mid-table.
So, okay. So, do you think we're going to finish that? Where do you think we should finish?
We should be in the top 4.
Okay. Saadi?
Yeah, that's exactly how I would have answered it, in the sense that where should we finish? I did a poll on Twitter before the Baleba links were out, and I asked, I think 1,100 people answered, and about 50% said top 5, regardless of Baleba coming, is the expectation for Ruben Amorim. I think that should be the expectation, top 5, because even if you eliminate City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, 5th position is there for you. You should be able to finish ahead of Newcastle and Spurs and Villa and Forest and Brighton and Brentford and Fulham and so on and so forth. The question is, will you? And I agree with Afsal. I actually, my preseason prediction was 11th. And we will probably be there or thereabouts. And it's not just that we're in 10th right now, it's that 3 matches, 4 points, you keep sort of that up where you're basically getting a point per game or slightly more than a point per game, and extrapolate that out to 38 games, and you're basically right there. I think our bigger concern is that we're, again, on both ends. You're not scoring enough, but you're also conceding basically 2 goals a game. That's the other issue, is that despite 5 defensive players in either a Casemiro or an Ugarte as a defensive-minded central midfielder, you're still conceding that many goals every single game.
Yeah,
so it limits your ceiling when you're both conceding often and not scoring often.
And I think I only made this realization in the last couple of days. I think I said the same. So I think mid-table will finish, and we should be top 4. But what's going to restrict us is the same as what's restricting Arsenal. They can't go that next level to go and win the league because they've got that manager who has that handbrake on. Ruben Amorim has shown us he's not going to take us to a league or anywhere near that because he's too cautious. His first thought is, right, I don't want to lose, and then I'll see to win. So I think, will he last the season? I don't think he does. So my premise is, if Ruben Amorim is still here, then we're mid-table. If he doesn't, and we do get a bit more of a proactive manager, then I do think we're finishing the top 4, because I think we have got the talents, we have got the players to get us there, irrespective of what it's currently shown.
Arteta's a good example, because I think with Ruben, he lowers the floor of your team because he puts players in positions that they're not accustomed to, and doesn't make the best use of them. But he also lowers the ceiling because of his mentality. Arteta, I think, raises the floor but lowers the ceiling. I think his organization, his set piece skills, so on and so forth, he certainly raises the floor of your team, but he lowers the ceiling. And so Arsenal, I think, and the Liverpool game this weekend was a perfect example. They just never went after Liverpool. And then, that was a worldly free kick from Szoboszlai, but you always leave yourself open to that when you just don't ask enough questions on the other end.
Yeah, and I think with Ruben Amorim, he's shown us plenty of times with his substitutions. Even forget the way he starts his team, but his subs have shown that he's never quite gun ho to go and get that win. So when people comparing him to Sir Alex Ferguson, Fergie was always, the first thing he wanted to do was win. He'll take a point afterwards if he needs to, but yeah, very rarely you used to see that. Boys, I think been a good catch up. It's been an interesting summer. I don't think it's quite what we wanted. I think as a club, I think there's a lot of questions now being asked of this ownership. Does it work? I think there's more articles that have come out by Laurie Whitwell as well, which are kind of odd glazers and Ineos on the same page. I think these kind of questions we had are getting answered more and more. But I think we will have to wait and see how the year finishes. But Sadia, like I said, always good to catch up with you. Always good to get your perspective from across the globe as well, to see how we do. But everybody. No, as always. But yeah, everybody, please, like, subscribe, give your thoughts on yours, what you think, how the summer transfer has been, and where we're going to end up, because I think it's going to be a squeaky bum time this year. Have a good one.
The guy that turns up on your body.